be the same.
Yep.
There are mutations involved, and although the end results are all the same, what they found out was that it could mutate it in various ways to get the same end result. So there's a two-part process to this evolution, that the end was already determined, but it may take a little bit of a random course to get to that end. So here's the point. Darwinian biology only emphasizes the random and therefore misses out on the main point of evolution, that the ends are already predetermined. And so it's not, the conclusions are not random, but the mutation steps as they occur might be random, yet the ends are predetermined. So it's Lamarckian evolution, because this is what Lamarck said.
What did Lamarck say?
He said that organisms and the environment have a purposeful interaction, that the organism, its expression and its biology is a complement to the environment that it finds itself in. I mean, at the time it was very obvious. It was like fish are in the ocean. They're not in the Gobi Desert, you know, and orchids are in the tropics and not in Antarctica. The reason is this: each organism is precisely matched to conform to the environment. So Lamarck looked at that when he put the theory of evolution together 50 years before Darwin, and more accurately than Darwin, put it together and said, to understand life, it's really to understand the community and not to look at the individual.
So the mistakes that the theory of evolution have made is to say we can recognize that the ear of the elephant works, but they mistake the ear of the elephant for the entire beast.
Well, they're just
as an analogy.
Yeah, they're just focused. They focus on the individual, survival of the fittest, when in truth it's the community that we have to focus on, and also this: the conventional Darwinian thought that evolution was a random process and we got here through total genetic accident is completely wrong in that regard, that organisms are not, that we got here was not a genetic accident, that you could probably start it all over again and it will still come out the same as it did the first time.
Okay, but random mutation happens, but it's not the whole mechanism driving evolution. There are other factors involved, and so they were blinded by the one factor and missed the rest of it. Insects and flowers, when they cohabit the same small geographical area, have amazingly specific adaptations to one another. Now, how do you suppose that happens? You find insects coming by and going to a particular flower because it gives off a scent that imitates its pheromone, so it thinks it's a female. And you see flowers in some species that imitate a female bee by the shape of the flower and the pollen, all to attract the bee to the pollen, so it comes in and takes a load of pollen and does its work of spreading far and wide. You know, these very specific chemicals that these insects, certain species of insects and their complementary flower and plant have going on between them, it certainly isn't random.
No, it's not.
But it's interactive. So it's not just the environment. My point is, it's not just the environment to the individual. Sometimes two individuals react to one another through the environment or through some medium that they're conversing.
Well, the environment includes all the individuals, so right away when we start bringing in the environment, when you fit in the environment, you have to be complementary to all the other existing structures in that organisms in that environment as well. It's not just insects and flies in our own bodies. For example, we wouldn't survive if we didn't have the appropriate bacteria cohabitating with us. And the interesting thing is that we've now recognized that the action of the bacteria in our gut actually switches the genes on in our human cells, so that our digestive processes reflect a dynamic interplay between the environment and the organisms, the bacteria that are out there, and our gene expression, so that in fact our genes are selected by the presence of the bacteria. So
now you wonder who's running the world, don't you? It might be the bacteria. Some people say the mitochondria within a cell began as a separate organism way back when. So I think we're layers upon layers of this whole conversation that nature's been having for time immemorial.
The newest information is very exciting because it leads us also to another understanding. Not just the mitochondria were the invaders in the cell, that the entire cell that makes the eukaryotic cell, it's called, the cell with a nucleus, and it's the complex with all the mitochondria and all the other organelles, that all the organelles were also part of a community of microorganisms, that the individual cell is really derived from a community of microorganisms that share the workload.
Okay, so then we can go back to Darwin and say it isn't competition of the fittest. It isn't just a competitive environment out there. Also, cooperation is another key to success, because look at all the various organisms that came together in cooperation that then allowed the higher organisms to come into existence. It was through cooperation.
Well, this has recently been in the journal Nature, a very prestigious journal. This topic came up, and it said this is in fact more important than the competition, the cooperation. That we keep looking at the competition, and because we look at the individual survival of the fittest, when nature looks at the community, what the community contributes to the environment. So what is the community of humans contributing to the environment? The answer really turns out that this is where the shock comes and we have to pay attention, is that evolution is selected by complementarity to the environment. That organisms that push the environment to extremes are ultimately eliminated from the environment so that the environment can get back into balance again.
I see. If you disrupt things, the environment will bitch slap you back to,
right back to start again.
Yeah.
You did it wrong. And what we haven't caught on to, and which is opening up in this new thought that will open up as the millennium here about genes and everything, is that, my God, we have just walked all over this environment without recognizing that the environment is more powerful than we are, and if we get out of line, as it has shown us, bacteria, viruses, and other changes in the environment will eliminate us right out of the environment, and understand that if we don't cooperate with the environment, then we will be lost from that environment.
No wonder we're still here, Bruce.
Well, it's an edgy issue, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's when we wised up. We maybe the clock is ticking.
Well, we've taken some step backwards in the last number of years from recognizing the importance of the environment and ecology to our survival, to living in a world where SUVs get 5 or 6 miles to the gallon. It's like, I stood on gas lines, I remember that, and I thought,
we have short memories,
to be independent of this, and yet we find ourselves with rolling blackouts here now. So.
Oh, that's right. You're
in
California.
Learn something, did we?
Yeah. And I guess we get to pay the rates up here in the Northwest. So.
Absolutely. Well, we just sometimes we have the phone on and sometimes we don't. So at least I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk now.
Another question from the chat room. Can genetic changes be accomplished via the morphogenesis that Rupert Sheldrake writes about, or is that too small a level to work at this?
No, I fully concur with the reality that the morphic fields, which represent environmental information, are profoundly shaping the expression of the organisms, and that becomes really critical, because the morphic field, being etheric and not physical, really is the collective actions of who we are, and
kind of
it
the
really
community
helps us
bulletin.
to understand that.
Kind of the community bulletin board for the whole species, right? What the monkey on this island does when it makes a breakthrough, it goes into the morphogenetic field of the whole monkey species, and then other monkeys can tap in and go, aha, I can wash my potato in the ocean. That makes sense,
well,
right? So it's a conveyor of information.
We resonate with the other humans, and if the other humans start to get a thought process that overwhelms us, that we acquire that even if we're just sitting in the field. That's a morphic response. So that's unfortunate, because we can get caught up in what is called a crowd response. That like an angry crowd, a pacifist in the middle of an angry crowd is probably not a pacifist in the middle of that crowd. There's just probably one of the people with a chair beating somebody over the head at the same time. And the reason that happens is when you get caught up in a crowd response, you actually start to flow like fish or birds that are flowing in a group. You start to flow in harmony and synchrony to each other. So, and that's part of the field. That's morphic field resonance.
Another question comes in about cloning for your comments. What I'd like to know about cloning is they say that, sure, you can clone a body. It doesn't mean a soul or the same soul is going to come and inhabit that body. So where does the soul and the body meet up? How much does that soul have to do with sparking that whole body? And this relates to another comment that some researcher was commenting that there's hundreds of millions of new cells born into our body every day. They instantly become magnetized by our thoughts and feelings. So I guess they have their own little mini morphogenetic field in order to adapt and become part of the whole. Where does the soul fit into that? What's the role of the soul as opposed to a morphogenetic field?
Okay, very series of questions. Let's start with the very quick one about the cloning.